Let's talk about the good, the bad, and the ugly of everything Apple related, because there is a big mix here. And we've been following this for a long time. So earlier in this year, I was shouting about this quite a lot, especially to our inner circle members. And I launched a podcast in early April talking about the move that Apple was making. And it was all based on a guy called Mark Gurman. Now, Mark Gurman is the Apple correspondent for Bloomberg News, and he's got a phenomenal track record for sharing everything that Apple are up to. And I wouldn't say leaking the information, but at least teasing that information out publicly before it goes public. And he was talking about these curiosity-based plans that Apple were looking at hearing and using their AirPods as a hearing aid. And it's always been super interesting, right? And as this has been talked about more and more, we've kind of seen what it's now come to. And look, I think there's some real good news, there's some bad news, and some real ugly news in this. And I want to talk about it. But before I jump into it, I want to share that I am focusing predominantly on the bad news here because we're business leaders, and a responsibility of the business leader is to ensure that you can navigate any form of change that's coming, and sometimes play in Dr. Evil and looking at the worst case scenario and ensuring that you're protected from that, knowing everything else is a benefit, is usually the most advantageous approach. And with that in mind, I really want to share where this could actually cause some real threats to the model that we've all become very solidly used to, and ensure that you can naturally pivot around that if them situations conspire. First things first, why is this so good news? iPhone users worldwide, right? We've got 1.6 billion people in the world have an iPhone. Hundreds of millions of people have AirPods. The fact that everybody who's got an iPhone right now is getting a push notification to tell them to download iOS 18.1, and hearing health features are part of it. And Apple will probably launch some new AirPods in the not too distant future, as I'll talk about soon. And their massive advertising budget is going to be promoting these hearing health features. One of our frustrations as an industry is we've been shouting from the rooftops that more people need to take consideration of their hearing health, right? Everyone has their teeth checked regularly, their eyes tested, a yearly physical. Nobody regularly tests their hearing, and it's been one of our biggest frustrations. Well, good news is we have the largest and most influential tech brand in the world kind of on our team. They are now shouting about this importance, telling people to care about their hearing health. And the big one is they're telling people to have consideration to their hearing abilities. And the prime example of this, and why I think this is going to be so beneficial, is very close to home. My father-in-law has obviously got a hearing loss. Everybody that meets him knows it, apart from him, because he will not accept it. We've tried to encourage him to go for his hearing tested. Not interested. We've tried to do everything, and I feel like a fraud, because Orange and Grey, the company that we work with, we write articles helping people to support a loved one on their journey to through hearing loss. And I'm struggling with my father-in-law. Nothing that I do beats this stubborn Scottish man that I deal with as a father-in-law. However, when I introduced what Apple were doing, he couldn't wait to test his hearing in his own privacy without having to sit face to face with somebody that is a professional that's going to tell him that he's got a challenge that he'll have for life and he needs to do something about it. He is the kind of guy who's going to think his hearing is here, realize through this that his hearing isn't as good as it once was. And he's now starting in that journey of awareness of now realizing that he needs to either consciously do nothing about it or consciously start to take action. So huge positives there. But let's jump into the bad news. And this is, I feel like an ass telling you this, but I think it's important, because ever since this is launched, this has kind of been the general tone that I've had of the sky isn't falling. We've had this OTC waves. We've had many waves in the past where we thought the industry was going to be disrupted heavily. And like when the OTC wave came in 2022, we all kind of feared the worst. It was after Lively were so aggressively taking market share. And when we seen this come up, it was like, oh, this could get pretty nasty pretty quickly. And what we discovered was, it was like a small wave compared to what we was expecting to be a tsunami. But when I speak to practices about what do they think about this Apple piece, these are kind of the things that I hear that are the reasons why this will never cause any form of disruption in the market. Things like they don't last long enough, the battery life's only 4 hours, people won't wear AirPods in social settings or environments, and the technology will never compete with hearing aids. And I am going to go through each of these and just share why I believe each of these statements individually may not entirely be true. Let's start with this one. They don't last long enough. Battery life only lasts 4 hours. Now, if you've ever tracked Apple, what is super interesting about how they operate is they launch the software first and then they follow it with the beneficial firmware or hardware. And what I mean by that is they launch the software update so I can update my iPhone today with the latest software. Then the next iPhone that launches, that is typically built in order to be the firmware that complements the software. Hopefully that makes sense. So let's say they launch these new camera features in the software, but the next iPhone that comes out has the hardware, has the actual technology to maximize those camera features. So based on this, with iPhone 18 coming out, it suggests with these hearing health features that new AirPods will be around in the not too distant future that will be built in order to leverage the hearing health features. Because the current AirPods Pro 2, I think mine are 2 years old. So like this has been technology on the market that's currently being utilized through the software update so people can have the hearing aid features, but it's not built for that software, if that makes sense. Now, going back to our friend Mark Gurman from before, here's what's interesting. I was reading one of his newsletters that he publishes, and he was sharing this about the AirPods. And I'm just going to have a drink of tea just while you have a little read of that. But he shared that the AirPods Pro 3 are due as early as next year. Now, I've heard Q1, I've heard Q2. Who knows at this stage, right? But what's very interesting is what's being predicted is more dramatic changes, planning a redesign for both the earbuds and the charging case. They're focused on sonic improvements and much better active noise cancellation capabilities. Now, if you've got the AirPods Pro 2, you'll know that their active noise cancellation capabilities are pretty good, like probably best in class for the earphone market, at least from my limited exposure to a few different brands. But this is quite interesting, right? Because if we know this is true and they launched the software before the firmware, you cannot tell me that Apple don't have the technology to build long-lasting batteries. They clearly have it. They've just never had a purpose for it. Like currently the AirPods on the market, they know people use them to listen to music, for video calls, maybe to listen to a Joe Rogan podcast that lasts for 3 hours. But like beyond that, like nobody's wearing these all day. So building that technology in doesn't feel that important. Whereas if people are going to be wearing these for hearing aids, then Apple have got the technology for long-lasting batteries, no doubt about it. So like some of these things that we now look at the AirPods Pro 2 and say they're not going to replace us or disrupt our market because of this, these AirPods 3 will probably address that. Here's the second one. People won't wear AirPods in social settings and environments. Now, this is a big one, right? Because this picture here, I've had to Photoshop this picture because they don't exist. Because if you've seen this man and woman sat in a restaurant having a meal and one of them had AirPods in, you would look at them and go, he's rude. He doesn't want to be there. They've got relationship issues. And that stigma is probably what we see as one of the biggest reasons why this won't become a social norm. And that is one of the deciding factors here between, will this be mass adopted or will this just be those situational use things that people utilize? And this is the tipping scales between the huge success and failure in my eyes. But there is one thing we need to take into consideration. I don't know if anybody remembers when Apple launched the AirPods in 2016. They did a big announcement. Remember, they went from earphones on a wire to wireless earphones, and they got absolutely laughed at. They got laughed at. Cigarettes in my ears look like Q-tips. Who designed these? This company has gone AWOL. They look ridiculous. Spectacular design fail. Everybody laughed at Apple. Nobody's going to wear these. Why would anybody wear these? They're just going to fall out. Now, I don't know about you, but like, I cannot walk down the street without seeing at least a handful of people wearing AirPods. And since then, AirPods have and Apple have taken over the headphone and earphone market. They've took 60% of market share, and they did this inside 4 years. And even if you take AirPods and separate it from rest of the Apple products, and it was just a company alone, it would be a $14.5 billion revenue company as of 2022. That's not the value of the company. That's how much revenue it turned over in 2022. That's bigger than Spotify, eBay, Airbnb, Shopify. Maybe X has potentially changed now from 4.4, but significant, right? And if you look at who currently owns AirPods, boomers are one of the big groups that own them, which is super interesting. And my main point here is this feels very, very weird right now. But given that if people start doing it and mass adoption occurs and it becomes more and more normalized, Apple have done this in the past. They rolled something out that everybody would said would never be normal, quickly became pretty much weird not to have AirPods, which is scary. And then we go to this one. The technology will never compete with hearing aids. I believe it won't personally, but here's me playing the Dr. Evil of sharing the worst case scenario. We know AirPods 3, AirPods Pro 3 are going to change and be more built to benefit the hearing health capabilities. Who knows what AirPods Pros 4, 5, or 6 are going to be like? Like we've got to accept they're going to get better and better and better. Apple are aggressively hiring for people in this form of space. If you go looking on their job board currently, there's a lot of jobs for people in these kind of roles right now in the audio technology role. And then this is the big one that stands out to me. Apple's research and development expenses for, we'll say it the last 12 months, but really up to June 2023 to June 2024 was nearly $31 billion. $31 billion just in R&D. That is the GDP of Cyprus, Senegal, Iceland. Like that is a significant amount of money invested in research and development. When you consider Resound and Starkey's combined revenue, not their R&D, just their revenue is just over 3 billion. You see that Apple are spending 10x in R&D than the entire revenue of two of the larger hearing aid manufacturers in our industry, which is pretty scary. And right. And let's just be very, very honest here. Apple are majorly fighting the big AI battle right now. And from what I read, they're a little behind where they'd want to be. I'm going to assume a large part of that money is in AI development, not in how do we take down the hearing aid market. But still, they've got the budget to go at anything they want. So we've looked at the good. We've looked at the bad. Here's the ugly. And the ugly is exactly what's going on right now. And we're seeing it, right? And I'm not sure if you're seeing it internally, but if you go and look at the mainstream media now, the media machine has started, and the media machine is spreading misinformation and confusion through clickbait headlines. Apple launch hearing aids. Apple turn AirPods into hearing aids. Like some of the biggest, most trusted media brands are very much talking a very confusing narrative right now that is resulting in confusion. And my advice to you would be like, set the narrative with the critical conversations that matter right now more than ever. Like you need to write to your patients and let them know, hey, this has happened. Here's what it means, and ensure they feel like the smartest person in the room when these conversations come up. Like write towards local physicians, set the narrative of what this means so that when they're approached and a patient says, what does this audiogram mean that I've done myself through my hearing test? The physician is in a position where they go, you need to get that validated by ABC Hearing down the road. They're awesome. Like ensure they're empowered. And through your website, like right now, you not having an opinion or saying anything about this suggests that you're hiding something. Like if the biggest tech brand in the world enters the space that you claim you're in and you're staying silent, that suggests that you purposely are trying to hide this or you don't have an opinion around it. Like you need to respond to this. You need to share what it means. And that doesn't mean be super defensive. That just means like, hey, here's the good, here's the bad, here's the ugly, right? Share the truth around this. But having an opinion around this is so, so key. This is one of the things we did with our inner circle members. So email out to database, set narrative with patients. We do a quarterly physician newsletter, set the narrative. And we've been talking about this all year as it's gone on since Q1. So we've followed this through and educated physicians. And then a number of articles on the website about this is coming. It's coming on this date. Here's what we know up to now. It's finally launched. And yesterday we did an article for all of our members sharing a response to it and ensuring that we're encouraging people to validate their hearing test, because like there's so much search traffic now. Having a brand like Apple enter our industry means that where we could get a few hundred searches for anything hearing aid or hearing care related, it's now going North Star, given that it's got the Apple influence. So that's the big Apple thing right now. And I hope I haven't scared you, annoyed you, frustrated you. I think we are playing in one of the most positive spaces as an industry. I'm an absolute optimist in every way. And I feel like we have got a blessing. If you could wave a magic wand and wish for one thing on our industry, I think it is this. But seeing all this stuff, just don't, as I would say, sleep on it. And what I mean by that is don't just brush this under the carpet as, oh, it's not that important. Like, this could cause some challenges. And where my mind would be right now is just going, okay, how do we build additional revenue streams into our practice to not be solely reliant on making margin on the unit, on the hearing aid. So that's where my consideration would be going. And if we want to zoom out a little further, let's look at an industry that's gone through something similar and look at photographers, right? Back in the 90s, a photographer, they were a product. You went to a photographer because they had a high-end camera, and high-end cameras were rare to get. As we came into the 2000s and digital cameras became so common, then you went to a photographer because they had a camera, but that wasn't that valuable anymore, and they brought high levels of service. Right now in 2024, if you wanted a photographer, you're not going because they have a camera, because we all have an awesome camera in our pocket through our cell phone. You're not going because they can deliver friendly service. What you're going for is because they help specific people like you to solve the challenges you're looking for. If you want high-end corporate pictures, boom. If you want high-end headshots, boom. If you've got a wedding coming up and it's this type of wedding, like, they understand the who. They understand exactly what you need. They help with all the follow-up, ensuring the right file size, doing airbrushing on the pictures. Like, that's how that model shifted from a product to products and service, and now a service-based model. Don't think our industry is going to do the same. I think high human touch is going to be pretty important forever. But just thought I'd share the worst case scenario, because if you know that, then as a business leader, you can only be in an advantageous position, and everything else is a bonus.